What's the problem with technical documentation? The further away it is from the code, the faster it becomes obsolete. A developer or a manager from the development team can write this documentation, but it will be very complicated. Peter from tech support will simply not understand it. In Git, we only have the source code and only God knows how it all works. Types of documentation that should be written. Hello, I'm Andrey Putin, and in one of the previous videos, I was going through what documentation shouldn't be written. Today, let's talk about what kind of documentation should be written. Here, I just would like to talk about our company's experience, how exactly we interact with teams, and also how we interact with other customers who order our software. The first scheme that we use is a service card. What's a service card? It's a list of all the services that we will use. eShop, WMS, OMS, PIM. It doesn't matter what service. There may be several PIMs. What do we usually want to show on this service card? For us, it visually consists of 3 blocks, a block of services, an ETL layer block, and the list of general context repositories. That is, we understand that the eShop, here we have the eShop for its work, for example, needs from the repository, from the general context, product cards, product balances, and whatever else that it may need. Well, let's say that nothing else is needed, and on the output, we will get the orders. Well, because what's the purpose of the eShop? The eShop exists to generate orders. Therefore, on the output, the warehouse system will generate product balances. So when we look at such a scheme, we can read the entire IT circuit of the company very quickly. And we can also very quickly figure out which system is responsible for what, so that we don't have to implement extra functionalities in other systems. And so that we're able to add new services in case we do get new functionalities. So why are we doing this? We want to keep each service compact and independent. We want to keep each service small and light. And overall, we want to speak the same language as the business does. Because if we show business complex architectural schemes where something is explained in a complicated technical slang, how will the business see it? Well, that's something clever.
Really?
That is, business won't be included. It won't be included with us in a conversation. Business will have to trust us and treat IT professionals as magicians. The service card shows everything very clearly and simple. You can say, look, we will have this service, we will add it here, it will be like that. The output of this service will be product balances. And for the input, we will need the product cards. Ultimately, we will have on the service card all the inputs and outputs of the processes. The second point is that if we have a service that directly interacts with another service or an ETL layer taking some data and immediately directing it somewhere else, it shouldn't be done this way, but sometimes that's how it is. Sometimes we need to map real life, and that's when we start understanding where we have loose coupling and where we have high coupling, which is better, and which allows us to make a decision on what kind of a circuit we will have. That's the first scheme. Now let me tell you about the second scheme. This type of documentation we usually use to evaluate and interact with the business, to discuss primary business logic. This kind of documentation is actually used during the change log process, meaning that it is not usually used to understand how the service works. Usually no one looks at it, but it allows us to clarify the requirements in a language that is understandable to business. It's a diagram of business processes. Let's say that this service here, for example, forms an order in a way that the product card with its product balances appears first. Then we do something there, then we wait, then we send something somewhere, or there may be some kind of a junction. Therefore, in this case, during the process of describing the actual task, we can firstly check the architectural requirements, and secondly, we can clarify whether we have taken everything in consideration. And there is a very important note that I would like to add here. Each block with such a scheme should be a business process, that is, a process described in a business language. Because there are so many schemes that I usually read, and almost all of the teams that try to follow this path fall into the same trap. They enrich the scheme with a huge amount of technical terms, And then, because of all these technical terms, they do not see all the mismatches, and the business can't see it either, because it sees both words that make and that don't make sense. Usually in such schemes remain only incomprehensible words, technical words. This should be avoided. When presenting our schemes, our tech leads and all our other specialists usually start with the procedure of assessment and agreement with the client using these schemes, because it allows us to verify that we understand each other correctly. If the scheme is written properly, it is easy to read by both business users and technical users. It's a certain way of making a better solution and a way to avoid making mistakes later. Because usually business can't always know certain nuances. It can't convey some things properly or in a clear way and in an understandable language. And when we simplify that into some kind of an understandable framework, the business, by reading this scheme, can realize that there is something missing. And they can say, hey, we've told you that there should be 3 statuses, but now we're thinking about something else. And we're probably just going to need 2, because we have a case where we're not using this one and we're probably going to give it up. All this pushes us to build a better solution according to the given requirements. And it's a very compact, a very fast mechanism. Multiple schemes can be written and agreed upon with the client in a day's time. What else can I talk to you about? Oh yeah, user documentation. A very common error made in user documentation is that it is written by tech teams. That is, there is a person or a manager in the team, someone who writes user documentation. That's okay when writing a draft, but it's not okay if this is the only way to get user documentation. How to write user documentation properly? In technical support, they usually work around the clock. First Peter works for 24 hours and then Paul works for 24 hours. What does this mean? This means that in 24 hours, the document written by Peter will be used by Paul to process users' messages. So, this is a second pair of eyes that won't understand something, that will say that there is something confusing or that there is something missing. A developer or a manager from the development team can write this documentation, but it'll be very complicated. Peter from tech support will not understand it. Since Peter and Paul are working together, they can simply call each other. Peter can just say, "Hey Paul, what did you mean here?" So this mechanism will lead to the fact that at the end of the day, you will have an okay documentation. Documentation which can really be used to brief someone, which can be used to ensure the independence of a software, which can be used when replacing a team or when hiring a new operator and dismissing an old one. So all these issues can be solved this way. The fourth type is endpoint documentation. How can we ensure that such documentation stays up to date? What's the problem with technical documentation? The further away it is from the code, the faster it becomes obsolete. If it's 2 different documents, if the code is in one place and the documentation in another, then there will be errors. But the description of endpoints and of the API service will be simplified if we are to use, for example, Open API or something similar. If we have written an API, then this API will greatly shorten the time of connection of commands with the service. It will make our life and most importantly our interactions so much easier. So what's the manager's task here? Actually, it's to ensure that the API documentation and the service itself are located in the same place. If these are different documents, and that happens sometimes, then we will have the API documentation together with another document which is not built from the service code. Therefore, the documentation can just diverge, and then we will think that we have documentation on this API, but in reality, when we start working with it, it will turn out that this doesn't work, that doesn't work, this doesn't have the correct output, and so on, meaning that you will start making mistakes. These are the 4 basic types of documentation that we use. That's it. Thank you. Oh, I forgot something. I forgot another type of documentation that can be useful. It's basically very similar to the 4th one. That's when we have a service stored with the API. That's GitOps. The developer does not have access to the product. How is that possible? The developer has a read-only access, meaning that he can see what's going on in there, but he doesn't have the physical ability to fix anything. He has to go into the code to do something. The only version of the truth here are the configurations and how exactly we collect the tests there, and so on. When we have it all in code, and when we can build a Git service, then you will get an independent service, because you know that you will have the documentation on how exactly to deploy that service and to make it work. Because very often I have to deal with such issues. We only have the source code in Git, and only God knows how it all works. Well, it should work somehow. We have Peter in the team, and he's kind of doing something, somehow, to make it work. That's not an independent solution, because you can't exclude Peter from the project. You can't transfer him to another project, because without him, no one knows what's going on and how it all works. And if this technical documentation is written by Peter and it is not in Git, then there may be a lot of nuances. That is, you will need to spend a lot of time checking such documentation. Therefore, GitOps is one of the ways of such documentation, which will always be up to date, because that's the most complicated part of technical documentation. And that's what I tried to explain in the previous video. If you're not using this technical documentation, it's extremely difficult to check its relevance. And if you will want to use it, for example, documentation on software deployment on the server, well, as long as Peter deploys it and does everything by himself, you won't know whether it is relevant or not, because he obviously doesn't need to read it. And when you will need this documentation, it can happen that Peter won't be available anymore. And the same story with the API documentation. If you have it written in OpenAPI, for example, and it's stored together with the code, then it's more likely that your API will work correctly. If it's a separate document, then most likely you will learn that there is something going wrong, usually when there is already a mistake or some kind of a problem, when there are deadlines, and when you need something very quickly, and it turns out that this doesn't work and that doesn't work. That's all there is to it. That's it. Goodbye. Now I think that's it for sure.